Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown. Series 3, Ignorance, the Mother of Devotion. For all of you out there, just to clarify the title of the show, Ignorance, the Mother of Devotion, is sort of like necessity is the mother of invention, and when something is needed, it's created. So when there's ignorance, you tend to have a lot of people becoming very devoted. Thus, ignorance, the mother of devotion. For those of you who've been watching the show, no clue why we set that title up, that's exactly what it means. And hopefully you'll follow along with us, and you'll see just how many things that you thought you knew, but you didn't know, and maybe we'll help you to open up your mind just a little bit. My name is Tarryk. I'm your host, and with me are my panel of experts, Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher and Bible researcher from Hackensack, New Jersey. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
And Reverend Hewitt, medium, pastor and founder of Gifts of the Spirit Church in Chesterfield, Connecticut. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay. Tonight's show is titled Women and the Bible, Part 2. We had so much to talk about last week, we couldn't get it all in, and we've got a lot of great stuff to show you tonight. But before we get into that, I want to remind our viewers that the show is live, and the number to call is 889-1728 throughout the whole show. Don't be shy. A lot of you wait till the very end to call, and then you end up getting cut off. So start early, and you'll have plenty of time. Also, we have an email address for our show, which is titled making_known@yahoo.com, and there it is on the screen. So for those of you who do miss calling in and you'd like to send us an email with a question or suggestion, send it on in and we'd be happy to answer your question. We also have something to share with you which is pretty exciting. A couple of shows ago, we gave you a little bit of a tidbit about a movie called The Naked Truth. And this movie, which runs for 2.5 hours, I believe, will be airing March 22nd and March 23rd, which is next Saturday and Sunday, at Gifts of the Spirit Church. And on each one of those days, it's going to be running at 10 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 4 p.m., and 7 p.m. It takes approximately 2.5 hours, so it will be running consistently all those times. Reverend Hewitt is presenting this video free of charge to anyone who wants to come. So I believe it's first come, first serve.
We have to have reservations. They have to call in. They have to call in and give their name and phone number so that we make sure that we have a seat for them.
Okay.
And they tell us what time slot they want. We have only 40 seats available.
40 seats per each showing.
For each showing, yes.
Okay. So viewers, keep that in mind. 40 seats per each showing on both of those days. I will remind you of this again later at the end of the show, in case I went a little too fast for some of you. And I think that takes care of some of the business portion for tonight.
It is a movie that they will talk about for the rest of their life, because it was made by scientists, and the name of it, as we said, is the hidden truth.
Naked truth.
The naked truth.
Naked truth, okay.
And you'll never see it in a video store, and it'll never be shown on television. Never.
And the phone number will be appearing at the end of the show as well for all of you to call to get your name reserved to see this video. I can't wait to see it myself. I have a little bit of an idea of what it's about, but it's intriguing. Okay. With that said, we're going to start our show, Women and the Bible, Part 2. And what I'm going to do is turn it over right away to Sidney. Sidney has done extensive research with respect to women in history, mythology, pre-biblical times, biblical times, and what we're hoping to do with this show, as we were doing with the last show, is to let all the women out there know that you got a raw deal, and that the way things are today have a real link in history with how they came to be. And I think you'll find it fascinating. And if it stirs up a little bit of emotion in some of the women who are calling us, or watching especially, please call and share with us your stories, your suggestions, your thoughts. This one's for you. Okay. And with that, Sidney, did you want to start?
Well, as you were saying, women have always been more psychically gifted than men because they're more attuned to the spirit world. It has to do a lot with the fact that souls have a charge to them, and the female soul, which is negative, is more gives them more of an access to the spirit world. Now, when I said negative, I didn't mean good or bad. Positive, negative, as on a poles of the battery, they have a charge. So the negative charge allows communication with the spirit world on a lot easier basis. The Bible has many, many references to women serving as mediums, or at the biblical term prophet. But of course, in biblical times, they didn't call a woman a prophet; they called her a prophetess. And in the book of Acts, chapter 21, verse 9, it reads, "And Philip had 4 unmarried daughters who were prophetesses." In Luke, it talks about Anna or Hannah, the daughter of Phanuel, who was a prophetess. And also in the Old Testament, there was a prophetess, Huldah. And it was quite common in biblical times when the kings had a problem, whether they were going to go to war or they didn't know what to do, they would consult a prophet or a prophetess, but more often a prophet, and to find out what, quote, the Lord wanted them to do, what Spirit wanted them to do. And so in the second book of Kings, chapter 22, there's a segment where the king came to a problem, and he sent a delegation to the prophetess Huldah. And I created a short video clip about it. So if we could roll that clip now.
The prophetess Huldah is an obscure Bible personality. Her story was hidden because the theologians did not like her prophetic message. During the reign of King Josiah, Hilkiah, the high priest, was conducting some renovations in the temple when he found a dusty scroll in the temple's basement. We continue the story reading chapter 22 of the second book of Kings and the New American Standard Bible. Then Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the scribe, "I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord." And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, who read it. And Shaphan the scribe came to the king and brought back word to the king and said, "Your servants have emptied out the money that was found in the house and have delivered it into the hand of the workmen who have the oversight of the house of the Lord." Moreover, Shaphan the scribe told the king, saying, "Hilkiah the priest has given me a book." And Shaphan read it in the presence of the king. And it came about, when the king heard the words of the book of the law, that he tore his clothes. Then the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, Achim the son of Shaphan, Achabar the son of Micaiah, Shaphan the scribe, and Asaiah the king's servant, saying, "Go inquire of the Lord for me and the people and all of Judea concerning the words of this book that has been found. For great is the wrath of the Lord that burns against us, because our fathers have not listened to the words of this book, to do according to all that is written concerning us." So Hilkiah the priest, Achim, Achbar, Shaphan, and Asaiah went to Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikvah, the son of Haras, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she lived in Jerusalem in the second quarter. And they spoke to her. And she said to them, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, tell the man who sent you to me, thus says the Lord, behold, I bring evil on this place and on its inhabitants, even all the words of the book which the king of Judah has read, because they have forsaken me and have burned incense to other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the work of their hands. Therefore my wrath burns against this place, and it shall not be quenched." Huldah was declaring that God did not endorse this newly found book. It had been written by the priest who claimed that it was dictated by God. However, Spirit was declaring that this book was a man-made document whose rules would entrench the priest's position as intermediary between God and the people, instead of the prophet or medium.
Thank you, Sidney. Now, I had a couple of questions that came up myself as I'm
Sure.
looking at this. Exactly what book is this that we're talking about?
The book that they found was the scroll of Deuteronomy. It became the book of Deuteronomy.
Okay, so clarify this for me. The book of Deuteronomy was really written by priests,
Yes,
but priests claimed that it was written by God.
exactly.
And just another clarification, when they talk about Lord throughout all of this, and and many people have seen this throughout all the different versions of the Bible,
Right.
Lord simply means what?
Lord means a spirit person who lives in the spirit world. Some people were under the conception they were talking to the same person all the time, but they really weren't. They really weren't. The Bible makes you think that, but it's really different spirit people that were communicating through these prophets or mediums.
So I can see why they lumped this all together and thought it was just one God.
Yes.
Every time they say Lord.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now she was, Huldah, prophetess Huldah,
Right.
was considered a medium at that time.
Yes. And basically, what she was saying was that this book was fraudulent. It didn't come directly from God. That in fact, these spirit people were upset with the book, and of course, that priest didn't like hearing that. And this is part of the reasons that the priests and the mediums didn't get along, because the priests were claiming they were the ones in communication with the spirit world when they didn't have the gifts of the spirit. It was the prophets and prophetesses that did.
So now tell me, the story here has to do with money that's being stolen? I read this and looked at it a couple of times, and I was a little unclear exactly about the crime that had been committed here.
It wasn't so much the crime. What basically it was that they found this scroll, and when they read the scroll, they discovered that they weren't carrying out what the things that they were supposed to. Supposedly, God wanted X, Y, and Z done, and they weren't doing it. So they thought they were in trouble because they weren't pleasing what God wanted, supposedly.
Okay, I guess what I was talking about was more specifically the area about the money in the house, or the
I think that description was talking about the job of that particular person who was involved in the story.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Now, I'm just your basic simple person, and reading the Bible for me had a little bit of a different meaning.
Right.
So it's better to have someone like you translate this properly, who can understand Hebrew, who has read over 200 and some versions of the Bible.
Over 250, yes.
And obviously has traveled and researched all of the facts as well.
Right.
Okay. All right. So that's an example. But we don't hear, I don't hear many ministers or priests in church talk about Huldah. I actually have never heard her name ever mentioned.
No, I never heard her name mentioned either until I was reading, doing some reading, and all of a sudden this name popped up. I never heard her name mentioned either.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the book of Deuteronomy was evidently kept in the Bible.
Yes, that became. See, at the point we're talking about, when King Josiah was ruling Israel, the Bible hadn't been written down yet. Everything was in oral traditions. Everything was talked about. But very shortly after that, in 581 A.D., the Assyrians came and they conquered Israel, and the Hebrews, and they burned the temple down, and they took them to Babylon. And that was called the Babylonian captivity. So they were in a different culture, exposed to different religions, and since they wanted to keep their identity intact, that's when they actually created a synagogue worship service, because before that it was animal sacrifice, and they wrote down their Bible. And this is why, like if you read Genesis, and the story of Adam and Eve, that story is a Sumerian myth of the creation of the world. Except it had the Sumerian gods. So the Hebrews needed a place to start, and they basically adopted that story. It follows it exactly, except they changed the name of the god. Okay. And but there was a lot of things. There was a big shift in their religion under the Babylonian captivity. But one of the outcomes was that they started to write the Bible down.
But Deuteronomy, was kept,
yes.
Even though
yes,
the medium told them that it wasn't authentic.
That's right. It had been. That was one of the scrolls that they did have down, but it wasn't in the Bible yet. It was just a scroll. But yes, they incorporated it into the Bible.
Okay. You started to touch upon other areas where different groups of people had to move.
Yes.
Due to war or political struggle or what have you.
Right.
And then they had to take with them some of the scrolls, which were some of their oral histories written down to some degree. And I know you had mentioned to me that throughout history, this was not uncommon for people to be moving from one area to another and taking their scrolls and their histories with them, but at some point, sometimes these scrolls were lost, or the history was misconstrued, or wherever they might have ended up in another area with a group that was maybe had a different ethnic origin,
Yes.
might have misinterpreted their scrolls as well. And I think I'm getting to something here that you had talked about before, but I'm not quite sure. You had talked about another woman at another time who was also a very powerful medium, and her name was Zephaniah.
Yes.
And I don't know if you could kind of bridge the gap from where you just came with Huldah to Zephaniah.
Well, Zephaniah lived in the time of King Saul. I'm not exactly sure how many years would separate them, but I'm sure it's something like 300 or 400 years in between the two women here. Zephaniah was she also was a medium, and while Huldah was regarded as a prophetess, which means there's an acceptability to what she did because of the word prophet. Zephaniah was not considered accepted at all. In fact, her mediumship was very much condemned in the Bible as something that was idolatrous and belonged to other religions, and something that the Hebrews were supposed to stay away from. You have to remember that within the whole Bible, this conflict between the priest and the medium existed, where the priesthood did not want people consulting mediums because they were the ones who had access to all kinds of spirit people, to the ascended masters and the highest levels of spirit, who would contradict their man-made rules that they were trying to get the people to follow, especially keeping them in a good lifestyle, and bringing them their money or their animal sacrifices so they could live well, and that was their chief motivation. So mediumship was definitely a threat. And this is why there's many prohibitions in the Bible against mediumship. But if you really understand psychic science, you'll start to realize that all the patriarchs of the Bible, all the major personalities, you could go right down through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Samuel, Jeremiah, all the Isaiah, Ezekiel, all those major prophets were mediums. They were the ones who could speak to spirit. It's the same thing. It's the same gifts.
Okay, but we've only seen a couple examples of women.
Yes,
There
are only a few examples of women that survived in the Bible, largely because I think the men wanted to suppress the women. The priests wanted to suppress them because there were so many more gifted women who were mediums than there were men. So therefore, it was more important to keep them in check.
I'm hoping that women out there, in particular, are watching this and hearing this. And what I'm coming to the conclusion of, and we have more to share with all of you, is that women were being shut down, even in biblical times and pre-biblical times, with respect to their gifts. And that it's a wonder why today you don't see any women priests, or you still see in Orthodox churches women sitting separately from men and not being allowed to worship near them. Sidney, have you run into any situations, I should say, of recent, where you yourself have still observed women being treated differently in churches?
Well, no, not in churches, but definitely in synagogues.
Okay.
In the synagogue, especially in the Orthodox synagogue, the women sit separately from the men. And if they attend a wedding or something like that, there's usually a wall that's drawn between the men and the women, because they're not allowed to sit together or to dance together or anything. And this, in the synagogue, their excuse is that if a man sat next to a beautiful woman, he wouldn't keep his mind on his prayers. So that's the excuse that they give. But I have a feeling that it's really not that; it's something else.
Now, you just picked up the large version of the Bible that you usually have with you.
Yes.
Is there something there you want to share with us?
Well, going back to early Christianity, the early church, before the year 325 in the Council of Nicaea, mediumship was practiced throughout the early church, and there was the first book of Corinthians, chapter 14, verse 26. I want to start reading this. This basically gives the rules of, and here it says rules of order, but it tells you how to conduct a seance. and how to have it so that prophets could be together and prophesy to one another to educate the people. And I'll just read it quickly. What do we propose, brothers? When you assemble, one has a psalm, another instruction to give, still another a revelation to share. One speaks in a tongue, another interprets. All well and good, so long as everything is done with a constructive purpose. So they're saying here that they want the mediumship done. They want the word of spirit to come through. If anyone's going to talk in tongues, and in tongues it simply means the person goes into trance, another person goes into the body and speaks a language that the physical person doesn't know. If I suddenly started speaking Arabic, which I don't know, or Greek, you would know that would be the gift of tongues. Let it be at most 2 or 3 each in turn, and to another with another to interpret what they are saying. They're saying that that unless there's no point speaking a funny language, a different foreign language, if nobody can understand what they're saying. If verse 28, but if there is no one to interpret, there should be silence in the assembly, each one speaking to himself and to God. Let no more than 2 or 3 prophets speak, let the rest judge the worth of what they're saying. Here they're talking about 3 different mediums delivering 3 different spirit messages to the people. When has that been done in the church lately? If another sitting by should happen to receive a revelation, the first one should keep quiet. You can all speak your prophecies, but one by one, so that all may be instructed and encouraged. The spirits of the prophet are under the prophet's control. In other words, spirit cannot just come in and take someone over against their will. The prophet has to say it's okay, since God is the God of not of confusion, but of peace. According to the rules observed in all the assemblies of believers, women should be silent in such gatherings. They may not speak. Rather, as the law states, submissiveness is indicated for them. For if they want to learn anything, they should ask their husbands at home. It is a disgrace for a woman. It is a disgrace when women speak in the assembly. It's interesting that they go directly from how to conduct a seance to silencing the women immediately. And that's because there were so many women who could go into trance and say something that would contradict the doctrines that they created at the Council of Nicaea and tell the people the truth, just like Huldah went and said, this book is not right. Don't follow it. She said exactly what the priest didn't want to hear. So they didn't want a repeat of that, and this is exactly why this goes from how to do it to keep the women quiet.
I could guarantee you that if any priest read that passage in any church or synagogue that I've ever been to, the women would have walked out. Just 3 things I wanted to highlight, and I know Carl wants to add something. Don't speak, be submissive, ask your husband. What kind of garbage is that? Okay, go ahead, Carl.
Let me insert this right here for the benefit of the women that are Catholic out there listening, watching this program. It is for that reason that they do not want women involved on the altar in a Catholic church. There is a chance that a woman in the Catholic Church could slide very well into a trance state, and some ascended master take over her vocal cords and voice box and come out with a lecture to all the people in there that would contradict everything the priest said. And what would that do to Catholicism? That is why they don't want a woman, and they'll never allow it to happen. And that would blow the whole religion apart.
And this is why they went and created all this negative ideas about mediumship, calling the woman a witch if she did prophesy, if she was a healer or whatever, and then eventually burn her at the stake in the 1500s. But even in the Bible, the story of Zephaniah, these Bible translators just go wild trying to cover up the truth with all these different ways of saying things, not to clarify, but more to obscure the situation. And the story of Zephaniah is very interesting, especially in the light of what we've just talked about.
I understand you prepared a little movie for us, a mini movie.
Yes.
That details some of the research you've done with respect to Zephaniah.
Yes.
Would like to share that with us? Would
Sure.
you like to set that up a little bit?
Basically, what this clip is going to do is it's going to go through the whole story of Zephaniah that's in the Bible. It's also going to bring in information that I got from this book, which is the Family Midrash. The Midrash is another Hebrew book. It's basically oral traditions, as we were talking before, about Bible stories. It is absolutely astounding how much more information is in the Midrash than is in the Bible story, which just leads one to believe that they took all this stuff out, especially the medium's name, to keep her more anonymous and be more threatening. They didn't want to let you know that her name was Zephaniah. Now, Zephaniah is a prophet in the Bible, and Zephaniah is a word just like in English we have the name Dana, and there are some Danas that are men and some Danas that are women. Okay, Zephaniah is the same thing. It could be a man's name or a woman's name. So the story of Zephaniah here is really enhanced in the Midrash and has some really fascinating details besides all the what Bible translators have done.
Okay. If we could run the tape on Zephaniah, our viewers could really have an eyeful.
Yes.
One of the most famous and misunderstood stories of the Bible is known as the Witch of Endor. It is not the story of an evil woman, but a gifted medium who assisted her king in a time of crisis. We know her name to be Zephaniah, despite the attempts of Bible translators to deliberately eradicate her name from history. As you will soon discover, Bible translators kept twisting the Bible's words to mask the truth of spirit communication from this story. Let us now read the New American Standard Bible version of 1 Samuel 28, 3 through 25, the story of the medium of Endor. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had lamented him, and buried him in Ramah, his own city. And Saul had removed from the land those who were mediums and spiritists. The Hebrew word in the New American Standard Bible, translated as medium, is Bahalas Ov, while spiritist is Hayidonim. The literal translation of Bahalas Ov means mistress of an Ob. James Strong, in the New Strong's Complete Dictionary of Bible Words, explains that Ob is the same root as Av, father, apparently through the idea of prattling a father's name. Probably a mumble, in other words, a water skin from a hollow sound, hence a necromancer, ventriloquist, as from a jar, bottle, familiar spirit. From this source we learn that Ov is a talking father, whose voice is a bit hollow. Once one is knowledgeable about the gifts of the spirit, it is easy to understand why an Ov or spirit could be associated with a hollow sound. A medium is one who can bring the words of a dead father through the veil that sometimes separates the physical world from the spirit world to the ears of a physical person. This can be accomplished through two types of mediumship. The first type is trance mediumship. Sometimes, if the psychic energy is low, the voice may sound very weak or tired. Since the voice would not sound like the father's voice, it might be described as hollow or tinny. The second type is trumpet mediumship. Spirit's voice is amplified by a metal cone-shaped device, similar to a megaphone, that can cause the voice to have a tinny quality sound. Listen to two spirits speaking through a trumpet, and you will hear the metallic, tinny quality that is being described.
This is Dr. Lewis.
Hello, Dr. Lewis.
Greetings, my son.
Greetings.
I am here with you today only to give you the encouragement of going on. Use your knowledge, my son, for the highest good always. And as you walk with Spirit, Spirit will walk with you.
Thank you very much.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Now, as we blend all of these definitions, it is not far-fetched to translate Bahalas Ov as a female owner of a father god or ancestral god. When I researched 130 different Old Testaments, I discovered that Bible translators have created 29 different phrases to translate Bahalas Ov in this verse. The number that you see on the list indicates how many versions used a particular phrase. Familiar spirits, mediums, necromancers, magicians, divined by a ghost, spirit of prophecy, divining spirits, soothsayers, sorcerers, spirit mediums, belly speakers, consult spirits of the dead, diviners, fortune tellers, trafficked with ghosts, recourse to ghosts, images of ancestral spirit, basilic, controls of spirit, converses with the spirits of the dead, get messages from those who have died, lying oracles, ahavos, speaking bottles of ventriloquists, spirit raisers, spoke with the spirits of the dead, tell the future by communicating with the dead, who held seances with the dead, witches. If Bible translators have this much difficulty translating the two Hebrew words Bahalas Ov, then how accurate can their translation of other Hebrew words be? Yet thousands of people consider the Bible as a perfect document directly from God himself. So why is there such a long vocabulary list for Bahalas Ov? The second word, which describes a gifted person in verse 3, is Hayidonim. The Hebrew root word is Yudoni. The Theological Word Book of the Old Testament states, the word Yudoni is derived from the root to know, yada. The New Strong's Complete Dictionary of Bible Words explains that yada, to know, as a primitive root, to know, properly to ascertain by seeing. Therefore, Hayidonim were people who knew things by seeing them, or the knowing ones by seeing. Today, we would simply say that Hayidonim were clairvoyants. Again, the Bible translators have created 29 ways to translate Hayidonim: wizards, soothsayers, fortune tellers, familiar spirit, spiritists, sorcerers, diviners, oracles, prognosticators, psychics, spirits, demonic spirit, expounders of tokens, false diviners, ghosts, intercourse with spirits of the dead, keepers of devils, mediums, necromancers, necromantic apparitions, professional foretellers of events, speakers from the belly to talk with spirits of the dead, those who divine with a jadona bone, use of secret arts, witches, Yudoni diviners, and Yidonim, which is a Hebrew word. Despite the fact that there are only two Hebrew phrases, Bahalas Ov and Hayidonim, in the original Bible text, some translators have included a third description of mediumship, just for good measure. These phrases would include charmers of devils in their womb, magicians, peoples using ESP, channeled voices from men of the past. We are going to consult the Midrash to supplement the Bible's story of the medium of Endor. The Midrash is rabbinical interpretations of the Old Testament writings. It consists of an oral history of the events of the Bible, providing background, motivations, and stories omitted from biblical texts. The Midrash was written down after the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem between the 2nd and 11th centuries. Midrash is a Hebrew word meaning interpretation or exegesis. The Midrash explains that Saul thought that Samuel would take pity on him and tell him what to do to escape the danger of the Philistine army. Ob magicians, the term the Midrash uses to translate Bahalav Ob, knew how to communicate with the dead through the power of Tuma, impurity. The Torah forbids the Hebrews from consulting an Ob, magician, and Yudoni in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verses 10 through 11. An Ob, an ancestral spirit, usually communicated through female mediums. Now let us continue the Bible story using the New American Standard Bible text. So the Philistines gathered together and came and camped in Shunem. And Saul gathered all Israel together, and they camped in Gilboa. When Saul saw the camp of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. When Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, either by dreams or Urim or by prophets. The Urim were special stones that the priests used to divine answers from God. Then Saul said to his servants, "Seek for me a woman who is a medium, that I may go to her and inquire of her." In the original Hebrew text, Saul asked his servants to find a Bahalas Ov, which the New American Standard Bible translates as medium. Once again, the Bible translators have compiled a long vocabulary list of 45 distinct variations to translate Bahallas Ov. Familiar spirit, medium, divineth by a ghost, owner of a familiar spirit, skilled in necromancy, consults ghosts, consults the spirit of the dead, contacts spirits, mistress of spirit prophecy, necromancers, spirit of prophecy, belly speakers, bringing up a lying oracle, call up spirits, charming ghosts, conjures up the dead, control of a spirit, dealing with ancestral spirits, divining talismans, enchantress, fiend speaking in the womb, fortune teller, gets messages from those who have died, ghost wife, medium of an ove, medium between the living and the dead, mistress of necromancy, mistress of spirit mediumship, necromanceress, owner of a speaking bottle, possesses a divining spirit, practices necromancy, pythonical spirit, soothsaying spirit, speaketh from the belly, spirit medium, spirit of python, spirit of soothsaying, talk to the spirits of the dead, tells the future by communicating with the dead, to raise a basilic, trance speaker, witch, woman medium, woman necromancer. The Moffat Bible provides us insight into his personal bias against mediumship. His translation reads, "Then Saul said to his courtiers, 'Find me a witch, that I may go and consult of her.'" The Moffat translation is a deliberate, malicious misrepresentation of the truth and deceives its readers. The Hebrew word for witch is kashaf. Anyone, even someone who cannot read a word of Hebrew, can recognize that Bahallas Ov and kashaf are not the same. Why is Mr. Moffat inserting the word witch with its negative connotation into this passage? An unbiased literal translation of the Hebrew word would not support the word witch in this text. This is one small example of a Bible translator inserting his own personal bias against mediumship into the holy text of the Bible. We continue reading the New American Standard Bible text. "And his servant said to him, Behold, there is a woman who is a medium in Endor." As we compare this story in the Midrash with the Bible's text, we discover that the writers of the Bible deliberately omitted many important details from this story. The name of the woman medium who lived in Endor was Zephaniah, which according to Pinker Rabbi Eliezer, a book of Jewish writing, Zephaniah means the hidden one. Since so much about Zephaniah's life has been hidden for centuries, this is truly ironic. Zephaniah was an educated woman and had studied Ob magic in order to teach it to others. The Sanhedrin, the Jewish court, was permitted to learn the rules of Ob and Yadoni if they required it for the purpose of judging. This statement caused me to question another biblical verse. In 1 Chronicles chapter 10, verse 13 and 14, it clearly states, "So Saul died for his transgression which he committed against the Lord, because of the word of the Lord which he did not keep, and also because he asked counsel of a medium, making inquiry of it, and did not inquire of the Lord. Therefore he killed him, and turned the kingdom to David the son of Jesse." If consulting an Ob were such a horrific sin, then why were the Jewish members of the Sanhedrin permitted the opportunity of learning the technique of communicating with an Ob? The Bible says that Saul asked his 2 servants to find a medium. The Mishnah tells us they were not servants but general of his army. Furthermore, their names were Abner and Amasa. Abner recommended that they travel to Endor to consult Zephaniah because Zephaniah was his mother. Returning to the New American Standard Bible text. "Then Saul disguised himself by putting on other clothes, and went, he and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, Conjure up for me, please, and bring up for me whom I shall name to you. But the woman said to him, Behold, you know what Saul has done, how he has cut off those who are medium and spiritists from the land. Why are you then laying a snare for my life to bring about my death? And Saul vowed to her by the Lord, saying, As the Lord lives, there shall no punishment come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, Whom shall I bring up for you? And he said, Bring up Samuel for me. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried with a loud voice. And the woman spoke to Saul, saying, "Why have you deceived me? For you are Saul." The Midrash claims that God did not want Samuel to appear through the use of old magic. The dead person who appears through old magic appears upside down because they appear through the power of impurity. Jewish scholars had a dilemma on their hands. Samuel spoke with Saul through mediumship, yet the priesthood wanted to discourage the Hebrews from seeking a medium's counsel instead of their own. Therefore, they created negative mythology about this event. Claiming a spirit is standing on its head to speak with a physical person is utter nonsense. Yet it demonstrates how far theologians will go to conceal the facts that physical people can communicate with spirit through mediumship. Samuel appeared upright because God allowed him to come and speak with Saul. This confirms that it was the actual spirit of Samuel who returned to speak with Saul through the mediumship of Zephaniah. This proves that mediumship is possible. However, some Bible translators do not wish the reader to accept the validity of mediumship. And the sacred scriptures, after the Eastern manner, clearly states, "And the fictitious Samuel said to Saul, Why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up?" According to Jewish belief, the spirits of the dead resided in a place called Sheol, which was in the ground or under the earth. This is why Samuel said, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" In actuality, the spirit world is on a higher vibration than the physical world. It is not a question of going up or down, it is a question of frequency. Returning to the New American Standard Bible's text. And the king said to her, "Do not be afraid, but what do you see?" And the woman said to Saul, "I see a divine being coming up out of the earth." The original Hebrew text uses the word Elohim. The word Elohim is translated thousands of times in the Bible as God. However, in their now consistent style, the Bible translators suddenly have become confused and created 30 unique variations to translate the Hebrew word Elohim. Gods, a God, a spirit, a divine being, a godlike being, a ghost, a godlike form, a chief, a dignitary, a ghostly form, a god, terrorizing superhuman being, a godlike figure, a godlike man, a great man, a mighty one, a personage, a preternatural being, a specter, a supreme, an angel, an Elohim, angels, divine messengers, Elohim, many spirits, spirits, the angel of the Lord, the words of Samuel. The Hebrew word Elohim is a plural noun. This means the correct translation would be gods. To avoid the issue of whether God is singular or plural, the Mishnah comes up with this explanation. Moses accompanied Samuel to speak with Saul. This is why the plural word Elohim was used in the Bible's text. Only Zephaniah saw Samuel, which would indicate that Zephaniah was using the gift of clairvoyance, which would qualify the use of the word Hayidanim. We continue with the Bible's text. And he said to her, "What is his form?" And she said, "An old man is coming up, and he is wrapped with a robe." And Saul knew that it was Samuel, and he bowed with his face to the ground and did homage. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul answered, "I am greatly distressed, for the Philistines are waging war against me, and God has departed from me and answers me no more, either through prophets or by dreams. Therefore I have called you, that you may make known to me what I should do." And Samuel said, "Why then do you ask me, since the Lord has departed from you and has become your adversary? And the Lord has done according as he spoke through me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and has given it to your neighbor David. As you did not obey the Lord and did not execute his fierce wrath on Elimelech, so the Lord has done this thing to you this day. Moreover, the Lord will also give over Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines. Therefore tomorrow you and your sons will be with me. Indeed, the Lord will give over the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Then Saul immediately fell full length upon the ground, and was very afraid, because of the words of Samuel. Also there was no strength in him, for he had eaten no food all day and all night. And the woman came to Saul, and saw that he was terrified, and said to him, "Behold, your maidservant has obeyed you, and I have taken my life in my hand, and have listened to your words which you have spoken to me. So now also please listen to the voice of your maidservant, and let me set a piece of bread before you, that you may eat and have strength when you go on your way." But he refused and said, "I will not eat." However, his servants together with the woman urged him, and he listened to them. So he arose from the ground and sat on the bed. And the woman had a fatted calf in the house, and she quickly slaughtered it. And she took flour, kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread from it. And she brought it before Saul and his servants, and they ate. Then they arose and went away that night. Despite the fact that she was exhausted from doing psychic work, Zephaniah volunteered her time and effort to prepare a meal for her visitors. Would a demonic, malicious witch perform this act of kindness? No, the medium Zephaniah's compassion was preserved in the text of the Holy Bible. The Apocrypha's book, Ecclesiasticus, chapter 46, verse 20, recounts this famous seance at Endor. We read in the today's English version, "Even after he died, he, Samuel, prophesied to King Saul how he would die. Out of the grave he spoke as a prophet to blot out his people's wickedness." This verse is the ultimate proof that this story actually happened. It was through Zephaniah's gift of mediumship that allowed Samuel to speak with Saul and prophesy that Saul would die the very next day. Samuel's prophecy was fulfilled. Saul did fight the Philistines the next day and was killed in the battle. The story of the medium of Endor proves the validity of mediumship, is one of the many examples in the Bible where a king sought a medium to predict future events, proves examples of how the editors of the Bible try to erase the truth from the text of the Bible, and provides examples of how Bible translators seek to hide the truth under their rubble of vocabulary words, and often insert their own biases into the text of the Holy Bible.
Thank you, Sidney. One of my first thoughts is that we could all sit in with you and have a great awakening with respect to the Bible and learning about the Bible. There's an awful lot there to talk about.
Yes.
But I guess the underlying message of it all was that Zephaniah was a medium. She was, she was applauded if she helped people, but she was also doomed when she helped people because of the situation at the time.
Right.
What did happen to Zephaniah? Do you know what became of her?
No, I'm not sure what it doesn't say what happened to her. She's just mentioned in this one context.
Okay. What's fascinating to me of all of this that was discussed is that we can see throughout all the different Bibles that you've researched how one particular phrase has been reworded so many different times.
Yes, the word "ov" is kind of interesting because the way Spirit explained it to me, because I couldn't understand how a spirit could be compared to a wineskin, and they said that basically you're talking about a vessel. You're talking about, today they would talk about Tupperware as a vessel to hold things. So therefore, it was a vessel of psychic energy. This is why she was a mistress to be this energy, and no matter what you put into the vessel stays the same. That's like whatever spirit comes through the medium. It's the medium's body is the same, but it's a different spirit that comes through. And they were trying to work on this idea. This is why they use speaking bottles, because see, in those days to make wine they needed some containers, so it was a wineskin. Later on they used bottles, and this is why Sharp talked about a speaking bottle of ventriloquists.
I feel like we should have been on the Learning Channel or the History Channel.
Right.
I mean, this was phenomenal and a lot of detail. And at some point, if our viewers would really like to sit and learn about this with you or contact you with respect to this and learning what really is going on in the Bible, they can do that, of course, after the show and call the phone number that we have provided, or better yet, even the email address,
yes.
makingknown@yahoo.com. There was something else that kind of stood out. Did you want to add something,
but
Carl?
before the first show went on this channel, I was meditating, and Spirit told me that this program is to be called Making Known the Unknown. This is where this came in. It did not come from me, you, or Sidney. It came from the other dimension. When they said that we are planning to have this, we are influencing you, and we're influencing the people here at the station to bring this about. And they were telling me for quite some time that we've got this in the works. There's many things in my life that they were telling me about, and this for a long time before it was ever manifested, including this program. And so the name of this, even as you wondered, you and Sid even mentioned it to me when I mentioned that ignorance, the mother of devotion. Both of you were, saying behind my back, why is he coming up with that for? Well, they were telling me that this next series is to be called that. And I said, well, why don't you people think about that for a while, and then you'll understand it. And you did. And that's where it came from. It didn't come from me. They just simply told me that that's what it's to be called. And when you think about it, it makes sense. They've got other ideas about future programs of which I do not know yet what they are.
Okay.
And they're making these plans themselves.
Well, personally, I'm very happy to do anything to help the cause. If it's the cause to really giving people the truth and sharing knowledge and wisdom, not a matter of a belief. Because as we've seen in previous shows, beliefs can change with the wind.
Right.
And beliefs, all the different beliefs combined and put together in different form make up the 12,000 or so some religions, which you have told us about, that are on the planet at this time. There was another word in there that really struck me when you were talking about oaths, speaking of things that were changed around. But some of these women were referred to as witches.
Yes.
Is this witch connection that comes up that leads to the Salem trials that we all know about, that leads to people being burned at the stake, and the whole notion of witch having such a negative connotation?
Well, Mr. Moffat, when he chose to use that particular word, did it kind of like after the fact. So, the connotation of the word witch was established, and since he apparently thought that Zephaniah was not talking with a spirit entity of a high quality, that's why he chose to use that term. He knew what he was doing, and he was putting down the mediumship. But in the Hebrew, if it was really witchcraft, that's a whole different word. It's the word koshaf. It's not bahalasov. So he really should not have translated that. So he's really exposing his bias against mediumship to a scholar who understands what the Hebrew says. He has no right to use that word in there, because the word witch comes from the word wise woman. And the word Wicca, because the women were wise because they were in communication with the spirit world, and they were getting guidance from the spirit world as to what to do, how to heal people, and so forth. And of course, the church didn't want this communication going on, so they came up with they tried to suppress it by calling it witchcraft, saying that they're in league with an evil entity, and eventually burning the people themselves.
And so what it really was a group of women who were maybe prophetesses or priestesses,
yes,
or mediums for that matter,
yes, exactly,
who got together to do this.
Yes.
And then, of course, a question that comes up to me is with respect to Wicca. You mentioned Wicca. Do you think that there are any roots with respect to Wicca as we know it now as a religion that might have started back there and then with calling themselves witches and witchcraft and so on. Do you have any information about that?
From what the way I understand it, many of their practices go back to psychic phenomena, and a true Wiccan has nothing to do with Satanism because they don't believe in an evil entity that way. They do go back to some of the older gods which were horned, and the Christians who created a devil with horns then were able to supplant it and say that they were in league with the devil, but in actuality they weren't. They were worshiping older gods that existed way before Christianity came to the planet.
And you're talking about gods. There were also goddesses.
Yes.
At that time too.
Yes.
Until evidently they were met with organized religion or Christianity or
well, it was all
there.
as we were talking last week, where those shifts went from matriarchy to patriarchy. When things became patriarchal, they only wanted a male god, so they tried to get rid of the female gods, the goddesses, as much as they possibly could. But the older religions had both gods and goddesses.
I found something interesting with some reading that I had done with respect to some information you shared with me, and this ties back to the goddess idea as well, that there were some crossovers in the area of mythology. And some of the mythology that we'd read about or grew up with as kids in school may really have had some base in truth with
Yes.
respect to pre-biblical or organized religion history, if that makes any sense to you?
Well, there were religions that were being practiced outside of the Judeo-Christian sphere, and many of these gods and goddesses were actually mediums and gifted people who we read now in mythology.
And evidently, I also read too that because there was a perceived threat by some of the men in these populations, where the populations might have had a large majority of goddesses per se, who were able to practice, I guess you could call it magic, or they called them the mysteries.
Right, mystery schools, yes.
Then they were threatened by that and then shut a lot of them down
Yes.
as a result of that.
Exactly.
I just, the more I read and the more I learn with respect to women in history and the Bible, the more disappointed I am.
One other thing, many of the Christian churches became established at the temples of the goddesses and gods of other nations, such as when we went to the Oracle of Delphi. We saw stones with crosses on them because they turned that into a Christian shrine. Same with the Oracle of Dodona up in Greece.
Okay, all right. Well, that is all we have time for today. As much as I think we could probably chat about quite a bit of what you shared with us tonight, for another show, we're going to wrap up tonight's show.
Do we have time to give the phone number for the church?
We're going to remind the viewers that at the end of the show, you'll see the phone number for the church, Gifts of the Spirit. I'm going to remind the viewers that we're showing the viewing of The Naked Truth, March 22nd and 23rd at 10, 1, 4, and 7. Making Known at yahoo.com. Send us a message if you have any questions. And until then, be well.